globally, we're seeing increasing numbers of regulation and compliance requirements around the world. So that's a good example of where artificial intelligence can do the job of understanding the language and matching different requirements across different standards or frameworks to one another.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Anthony Stevens. Anthony is also Ant in Australian. He wants to be named Ant. So he's a CEO and co-founder at 6Clicks, a thought leader and visionary in the field of artificial intelligence and enterprise software. He published recently a book titled AI and the Future of GRC, which we've also discussed today on our podcast. But before founding 6Clicks and had held several executive roles for publicly listed and private businesses, including partner and chief digital officer at KPMG, where he led the digital transformation of the firm's business model. And Anthony was also a CIO advisor for Zoom. So, welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast today.
Thank you, Boris. It's great to be here today.
It's my pleasure too. So I believe that we will have a very thoughtful conversation on the topic of how AI is transforming the GRC space. And we take some key takeaways, we'll discuss some key takeaways from real world applications and that you highlighted in your book, and maybe practical advices for businesses on leverage technology. And we will discuss your inspiring entrepreneurial journey. But before that, could you tell us a short story about your career path, what brought you to where you are right now, and what you guys are at 6Clicks are up to these days?
Yeah, thanks, Boris. I started my career about 25 years ago, actually in 1999. I started as a cybersecurity engineer and spent my time sort of working up through a consulting organization called Dimension Data. Dimension Data was later acquired by NTT, who are one of the biggest telcos in the world. I ended up probably in my late 20s as a chief information officer for $1 billion business. And from there, sort of changed roles a few times, worked for a publicly listed company as a head of transformation and chief information officer, and then ended up as a partner and chief digital officer for KPMG. And then that was about 6 or 7 years ago. At that point, I left KPMG. I had an idea, which obviously happy to share more with you today, but then founded 6Clicks back in 2019, and we launched our product at the start of 2020. And today we have thousands of customers around the world, operations in Europe, UK, the US, Australia, of course, the Middle East, Japan, and expanding very quickly. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Wow, it's a great story for such a short period of time. You were able to scale your business. But let's discuss our main topic. Maybe we can come back about your 6Clicks story later. But what is your vision for AI in GRC? Because in your book, you highlight that AI as a transformation force in the governance, risk, and compliance. How do you envision AI shaping GRC in this next decade, particularly in industries resistant to rapid technological adoption?
Yeah, actually, I before I wrote the book AI and the Future of GRC, about 5 or 6 years ago, I wrote my first book, which was titled Chasing Digital. And in that book, I described, along with my co-founder, Louis Strauss, the concept of systems of intelligence. And systems of intelligence combined data, user experience, and logic in a way, artificial intelligence in a way that all three of those ingredients were needed for a successful or engaging uh, uh, experience and productivity benefits for organizations. So when I've thought about the application of AI to the world of GRC, that concept is very much at the heart of where I see the opportunity is or has been and continues to be and will continue to be for coming years. I think the reason why most companies, most risk professionals, compliance professionals think about GRC largely until recently as being a system of record, as being a system where it helps automate or drive some automation around the data that they need to capture to manage risk and compliance obligations or requirements. Um, I think with artificial intelligence, there's a range of different applications. One of those is simply, and this journey we started at 6 Clicks back in 2019. I'll tell you that story later. But one of those applications is simply to take specific use cases associated with risk and compliance and fundamentally transform them to remove a huge amount of manual activity. Um, that's one example, and I can talk more about that later. The second one is to think about how do users interact with a system with a GRC tool, and that's using, for example, natural language. We're all familiar with that in the context of ChatGPT and these sorts of tools. But imagine if you could just query your system and engage with it in the same way that you can, interact with a chat agent. And the next evolution is to think about how do we then incorporate data and think about the concept of agents and how will agents play a role in both responding to queries that users might have, but also proactively presenting people with insights, risk intelligence, compliance insights, etc., based on what's happening external to the organization as well as internal to the company. So that's the vision I have, and we certainly live by at 6 Clicks, is how do we rapidly evolve the capability within the platform? We've been on this journey for 5 or 6 years now. How do we rapidly evolve that and start thinking about a world where natural language interfacing with the platform is commonplace, and then, as I said, the proactive element of the artificial intelligence capability starts to come to life. And that's something we're working on at the moment, and certainly the vision that I've got.
Fantastic. Yeah, in this time, think about all AI agents, or you can agent about buying your stuff. You can have a GRC agent, right, to to
Right.
check your interesting. But what about ethical AI integration? Because you discussed the importance of building trust and addressing ethical complexities in AI-driven GRC solution. What are the most critical steps organizations should take to ensure that their AI systems uphold transparency and fairness?
Yeah. So we've taken this. We've been very conscious at 6 Clicks to think about how we use artificial intelligence, and I would certainly recommend those same principles for organisations looking to adopt any form of artificial intelligence. I think that's particularly true now with, DeepSeek and these platforms that are emerging every 5 minutes, it seems. But like a lot of areas of technology, there are regulations or standards or frameworks that can be adopted by organisations to help them understand the best way to ensure the ethical use of technology or artificial intelligence. For example, 42001, the ISO standard, I'm sure your listeners would be familiar with or at least aware of. 6 Clicks was actually the first GRC platform in the world to adopt and get certified for that standard several months ago. So it's very new for obvious reasons. And those sorts of opportunities I would encourage organisations to think about. I also think when it comes to trust and transparency and ethical use of artificial intelligence, it's useful to publish or make available your policies and your charter and your responsible use um, framework publicly. We do that at Six Clicks. We have a whole website where we publish the way that we think about the use of artificial intelligence models. We also give users, particularly governments, maybe regulators, people working in sensitive industries like defence, we give them the ability to opt out of artificial intelligence, right? If they perceive the risk to be too great, then that's something available for them to think about as well. But for my advice to organisations thinking about it is certainly to, develop a culture of trust and transparency and apply that same culture to the world of artificial intelligence and, consider looking at the use of or 27000, sorry, 42001 as a standard to hold themselves sort of independently accountable.
Mhm. So let's discuss real world challenges. In your book, you mentioned the challenges that like data overload and outdated processes in traditional GRC. Could you share a case study or example from your experience where AI significantly overcame these challenges? Maybe without dropping the names, but just in.
Yeah, no, I understand. A great example of when we started the journey at Six Clicks, we took a company's existing compliance spreadsheet, right? And in that compliance spreadsheet, like many organizations, they have multiple tabs reflecting the requirements across multiple different standards. And they were effectively trying to think about how do we build a unified control framework to help us ensure we have the controls in place to meet different requirements across different standards. So the first problem we solved with artificial intelligence, this is before generative AI, was actually identifying the similarity across different frameworks or standards, and doing that in seconds as compared to days. Um, we engaged with an analyst company to do some research around how much time that would save, right? Like to do that manually using a spreadsheet versus using artificial intelligence, a combination of natural language processing and machine learning. We sort of estimated that that was about a 14x improvement in productivity. And especially today, where there's an increasing number of standards and frameworks and regulations around the world, Europe, of course, there's in some sectors in particular, heavily regulated environment. But I think, globally, we're seeing increasing numbers of regulation and compliance requirements around the world. So that's a good example of where artificial intelligence can do the job of understanding the language and matching different requirements across different standards or frameworks to one another. We do lots of similar things actually with AI and have continued to invest to help companies identify gaps in policies, right? So to take their existing policy and identify against a particular regulation where there's gaps, or even simply recognizing that most companies have got policies in Word documents or in PDF documents. How do they then break those into controls simply and easily using AI? And all of these problems we've solved. We've got a long list of, additional problems to solve over the coming months and years, including, as I mentioned, the idea of an agent that I think will be, particularly powerful.
Hmm. Awesome. So let's discuss leadership in AI transformation because you had experience with biggest consultancy and other companies. Uh, you define forward-thinking, risk-aware, and adaptive leaders as essential for AI integration. What advice do you have for leaders aiming to foster a culture that embraces AI in GRC while addressing employee concerns about automation?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really interesting space at the moment. the news, as I mentioned earlier, the DeepSeek announcement sort of, raises lots of questions around even things like capital investment, how much money
Mhm.
people should spend on this stuff, and what sort of return on investment people should expect. I think there's a few things that are not going to change for every organization around the world. And that is, their understanding of the data that they have and the data that they can leverage to help drive automation with or without artificial intelligence. But I think harnessing that data and applying it to problems, leveraging generative AI or foundational models, is a very powerful thing to do. And I would encourage all leaders to foster a culture of experimentation, foster a culture where people can take particular problems, leverage artificial intelligence, and test things. But at the same time, as we were talking about earlier, understand the ethical framework that they need to wrap around whatever solution they ultimately use across their organization. So it requires a changed mindset and also the ability to adapt quickly. But at the same time, as I said, recognize that, the user experience and the data are largely things that they can identify within their organizations. They don't need to be scared of that. They can embrace those things and wrap their arms around it, and just keep pretty open and fluid when it comes to the rest of the technology market, large language models, etc., that are changing more frequently. So yeah, I mean, it's like all areas of technology. My experience, I've been doing this for my whole life since a little kid, and you need to embrace change. You need to think about technology in a very broad sense, but at the same time have the ability to execute. And I think it all comes down to those sorts of principles.
Mhm. Let's discuss future innovation because you explore in your book predictive analytics and scenario planning as AI strengths. What emerging AI technologies or methodologies excite you most for advancing GRC practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think the GRC market has been, I mean, the reason why Six Clicks entered the market was to disrupt the traditional players, right? Our mission is to provide a very contemporary alternative to platforms like Archer and ServiceNow and Diligent and OneTrust and, companies out there that have been approaching the GRC market in a very traditional way. We think about the market, from our pricing to the way our technology works, and particularly around the artificial intelligence agenda in a more contemporary manner. But I think the sort of opportunities come with integrating more data into the platform in a seamless and very easy to use manner, and doing so without software developers, without months and months of consultation and implementation people, doing that at a turn of a button, or a press of a button, and then having on top of that artificial intelligence capability to derive insights predictively to create alerts around threats that are emerging, risks that are emerging, or trends in existing data that might start to unfold that the organisation needs to be aware of. I think the other huge opportunity is to think about GRC systems and GRC technology has traditionally been used by obviously GRC professionals. And one of the big challenges we hear, and I've been very aware of, is um, the challenge that GRC professionals have in engaging with the wider workforce. How do they get and develop a cultural an awareness across the organisation about risk and compliance? How do they do that in a really easy to use way, very easy to use way? Um, and quite often that is not inviting everyone into a GRC tool. I think that's a can be a big challenge. So my view is, how do we use technology? How do we embed data about the policies, the risk management framework, the risks, etc., for an organization. How do we embed that into tools like Microsoft Teams, Slack, Zoom, etc., so that every employee out in the organization is enabled to understand either proactively log a risk or log an issue or log a compliance finding, or conversely be alerted to something that they need to keep in mind. So they're the sorts of things we're hard at work thinking about and researching and deploying very quickly.
Right. So, and I would like to ask you a personal point of view. What are the major misconceptions in the field of AI in the risk GRC space that you kind of strongly disagree with?
It's a good question. Um, I think a lot of people see the sorts of problems that can be solved um, in the risk and compliance market with AI very simply, like not transformatively. Um, I don't think there's enough big thinking. And I think people look at AI as a simple enhancement to the current way things are done, providing slightly more, beneficial, slightly more productivity, but not fundamentally changing the industry. And what I think is, when we start to think about the impact that artificial intelligence is having on humans around the world, either at home or at work, that there is likely to be a huge amount of disruption in this market. And I think it's going to change very, very quickly. I have met people who argue the opposite, which is, GRC professionals that, it's a very conservative market. Things move slowly. Things are very, extensive amounts of consideration. I think that's all true. However, I think we underestimate the ability for anyone to think about a world that's fundamentally easier and we can do things better. And I think when we look at other industries at the moment, things are moving incredibly fast. And I think GRC professionals should have higher expectations, frankly, of the technology that's available to them.
Fantastic. So, if we summarize our interview for someone who is listening in, and would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would it be?
I think expect a lot. Expect a lot of change. Expect a lot of disruption, alternatives, and better ways to think about risk and compliance in the market now, and particularly over the next 24 months. I think that's probably one big lesson. The other thing that I think is a good takeaway for your listeners is to consider the fact that the traditional GRC market, or the way in which people have approached the GRC market, has been largely stagnant for several decades. And I think that's highly likely to change with AI, but only when it's considered to be implemented in a trustworthy way, with ethical considerations, and as we talked about earlier, sort of compliant with the likes of 42001. So I think there's this sort of always this balance of saying, let's move really quickly, let's disrupt, let's change things, but at the same time, let's be very aware and conscious of what that technology can represent positively, and also some perhaps unforeseen consequences.
All right. Fantastic. Were all my questions for our first interview. Probably we can continue further with some specific in different topics because you have such a large body of knowledge in the space, and you are really a leader in the AI implementation. But if I forgot to ask you something that you feel is important to our audience, please go ahead.
No, I think that's a really great start. I'd love to keep the discussion. Maybe we can dive into a number of different use cases, right? Like I think the question I get asked all the time is, provide more examples about where artificial intelligence can change things. And for example, the stuff that we've worked on at 6 Clicks, and we've already released, it's been running for several years now, relates to, I mentioned, just defining gaps in policies, automatically creating policies and controls or risks and controls using AI, responding to repetitive audit responses using artificial intelligence, extracting data from documents, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a number of, really, really beneficial capabilities out there. We develop them, but there's other vendors out there that have thought about this as well. And then I think an important thing is to when you think about GRC, to partner with organisations that have a strong vision in this space. I spent most of my life buying technology, and I think it's a key consideration. So.
Oh, fantastic. I would like to also propose this follow-up series on AI implementation and different case studies. It would be great to hear on
Yeah.
specific topics, maybe from your kind of subject matter experts and some other people, of course, also from you guys from in the leadership, but it will be a great idea. Well, thanks again.
Yeah.
And I wish you and your company, the Six Clicks, great success, and I hope to hear from you guys in the future.
Yeah. Thank you, Boris. Thanks for your time. Great questions.